in terms of preparing for this, it sort of required us to ask ourselves questions like, what would it feel like if it was the end of everything? Which is a sort of wild thing to ask yourself. I guess it's the same as like, what would it feel like to die?
How did it feel for you to get to put down that suitcase as Chuck, but also metaphorically as, you know, Tom, and get to actually spend time studying and do the dance and get to have that big moment where you get to move so freely and kind of share that freedom then with Annalise and share that moment?
Honestly, it was a joy. It was a joy from start to finish. Dancing has been a great joy for me in my life. I think it's something that comes naturally to all of us. I think, you know, most children tend to dance before self-consciousness arrives. I really have loved and studied and admired the truly great dancers for as long as I can remember. Fred and Ginger, or Gene Kelly, or Donald O'Connor. As a very young child, we had a VHS of the ballet of the Nutcracker, which my sister and I must have watched in excess of like 400 times. And I had
wearing the tape down.
Yeah, exactly. I should say I've never trained to this level classically as a classical dancer. Like, I didn't have Chuck's training. I did a little bit when I was at drama school. I had the great challenge, and it was a really enjoyable one, of getting to grips with these different rhythms and styles, like how jazz is different from swing. It was wonderful. It was just a joy. And I think perhaps I'm old enough now, and I don't want to sound maudlin or sentimental by saying this, but I'm old enough now to know that I may not be able to move like this forever. I think when you're young, you think, oh, I'll have all this range of motion. I'll be as agile as this forever, and I know I won't. And I think there was I thought this is a moment in time I'll never forget, where I'm only as young as I am today, and I'm only as you know, as agile and fit as I am today, and this may not last. So grab it with both hands and express it and be free. And it was, so I had that perspective on it, I think.
I would love to kind of dig into your sequence with Tom, because, you know, I just spoke to him and he was saying he kind of hadn't had any training in dance his whole life, but he loves dancing. But you are a trained dancer and you've kind of been dancing most of your life. So could you talk a little bit about that journey for you and kind of it leading you to Life of Chuck?
I have been dancing most of my life. It was my first love, and I love dance, but I have not had a lot of experience following someone's lead. Dancing alone, you know, working on choreography, whatever, is different from obviously following someone's lead. And Tom was a pleasure to follow, because although he's not a professional dancer, and although I'm trained, I wouldn't consider myself a professional by any means. We did share a mutual love of joy, which made following his lead just such a pleasure and a breeze. We did that scene hundreds of times, or at least that's what it felt like. And every time it felt like we were discovering something new. It felt alive. It never felt stale. And even Taylor, the drummer, every time she played it, she was the heartbeat. And it was like the same song, but a different moment in the dance to just really, I don't know, you hear a song once, and then maybe if later in the day you hear the same song and it sounds a little, and I don't know, it's just curiosity and discovery in the moment and that freedom.
What a joy to speak to you both about this just incredible movie. Thank you so much for taking the time. How are you guys feeling today?
I mean, I feel great. I don't know about you, but I feel great.
No, listen, two things. I saw it once at Mike's house with my wife in a little screening room, and I thought it was extraordinary. The difference of seeing it at the Toronto International Film Festival was a revelation. You had a packed house with people who had no idea. There weren't, you know, synopsis handed out or any fact sheets that is based on a Stephen King. They just saw it cold. The emotion in that theater was palpable. They were with us from the very first moment. They laughed. They gave the dance sequence got huge applause.
Yeah.
And when the lights came up, I saw grown-ups with tears in their eyes. I hope people don't watch it on their phone. I hope they go.
I feel like it's a cinema movie.
Exactly. I mean, the audience is such a part of any experience. You know, Benjamin's been on Broadway. They say to me, how do you do the same thing 8 times a week? I say, I never do the same thing 8 times a week. The audience is a crucial element of every performance, and you play to that particular audience, and that's how you keep it fresh.
You play a very unique part in this film. Without spoiling anything. So could you kind of talk about how you two prepared for living in the kind of apocalyptic aspect of the life of Chuck?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of it was on the page, you know, inevitably, both in the short story by Stephen King and in Mike Flanagan's script. And the tone was really set, which was this kind of there was a deep honesty to it. There was a real sense of the kind of emotional stakes, as well as the sort of apocalyptic overview of what's happening. But charged through that is this sense of hope, it felt to me, that I felt like there was something just very life-affirming and enriching about these experiences and experiences of these characters, even in this very difficult time that they're kind of going through. And a lot of that was in the relationship, or at least it starts within the context of that, you know, that they are having this conversation and they are relating to each other and rekindling a sort of an emotional connection that feels very truthful and mature, you know, just very kind of considered. So they're two people who've kind of decided to reconnect with each other for profound reasons.
In terms of preparing for this, it sort of required us to ask ourselves questions like, what would it feel like if it was the end of everything? Which is a sort of wild thing to ask yourself. I guess it's the same as like, what would it feel like to die? And so that was a really interesting thing to kind of dive into and try to imagine what it would realistically feel like. And I think it's so many different things. It's terror and it's dread and all the things that you would imagine, but on top of that, there's some humor sprinkled in there and other emotions that maybe are more unexpected.
How did the movie come into your life? How did Becoming Gus start? Did you get the script? What was the conversation like with Mike?
Yeah, a good friend of mine, one of the producers of this movie, actually, named Alon Gale, he was like, hey, Mike, he reached out to me and said, hey, Mike Flanagan wants to have lunch. And I didn't know Mike Flanagan's work at the time. And I was like, yeah, whatever, I'd love to. Like,
sounds cool.
That's great. So randomly, you know, and it doesn't happen very often where you're having, I know people are like, oh, Hollywood's always about lunch. And it is on like the agent side and all that. But like creatives don't really get lunch. Anyways. I digress.
It's rare that you get to sit down and talk to someone about like stories and making stuff.
But this wasn't even about that. This was just about a chance to meet. And so we sat there, Mon and I and Mike sat there for 3 hours and we shot the shit and barely talked about Hollywood at all. Talked about kids and Dungeons and Dragons and all kinds of fun stuff. And then at the end he said, you know, I'd love to put you in a movie sometime. And I said, yeah, that would be great. I will, anything you say, anything you know, if you ever come to me, I'm an automatic yes. I'd love to be in your world. And then went back and watched Midnight Mass and fell in love with him as a filmmaker. Cut to about a year later, he called me and said, hey, I've got a movie. I don't know if it was a year, whatever, 8 months or something. And he's like, I've got a movie I want to offer you. It's small part. It's, you know, Chiwetel and Tom Hiddleston and Karen Gillan. And I was like, I'm in. He's like, yeah, but you should read it because it's a small part. I'm like, I'm in. I just want to be in your world. I said, you know, it doesn't matter what you pay me. I'd love to just come and work. And so I got the script. I fell in love with the script itself. It was so beautiful and was just really chuffed to get a chance to play this, you know, really lovely character.
What do you hope that people take away from the movie now that you've gotten to make it? Now it's won the Audience Award in Toronto, is going to head out into the world. What do you hope people take away from it?
To just dance. Life is too short. Dance. It doesn't matter who's in front of you, where you are. If you hear a song that moves you, dance is just so powerful, and that insecurity or the lack of confidence or the fear that you feel is gone in an instant when you just trust yourself. And there are two kinds of dancing, I believe. There's professional, and then there's just having a good time. Just have a good time. Have a good time. People will be so jealous because you're just there not caring about anything else. It's just about joy.
And my hope is that, I never trust critics personally.
Yeah, understandable.
I'm hoping that the effusiveness of this moment, the sort of like symbiotic relationship between where we're at in the world and this film's timing, I'm hoping that it like catches people's charm and drives them to the theater. My hope is that they go with their family, they go with their chosen family, they go with their friends, and that they let the movie wash over them.
If we're asking ourselves, what will it feel like to die? You know what I mean? If that's a question that one asks oneself, what will it feel like to die? Then, and you feel like, well, obviously that it has all of these things. It has all of this the sense of fear, the unknown. There's kind of, there's kind of terror. There's a reflection in those things. They're difficult questions, but because it's difficult, the experience of life is then meaningful. It's then enriched by that. And I guess that's what this film is speaking to.
I know, it really made me kind of imagine being on my deathbed and asking myself the question, what would you do differently in your life if it was all about to be over? And I think like the biggest thing I came up with is like, are you letting fear stop you from doing anything? And I think that's a really interesting thing to ask yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And also like one of the biggest ways that we kind of self-sabotage is like being scared of what could happen if we take that next step. So I think that's a really relatable one.
I am wonderful.